and we'll be fine, right? We won't have any issues again. They've not really taken time. They've not really taken time to study their own processes, document the proper documents of their plan, their objectives, their goals, their kind of activities, and their processes to see whether that software will fit into their work. So planning was not done. They hear the advert, and based on the advert, they buy the software. It's only when they have brought the software in, they now realize that they will struggle to deploy it, or they cannot really deploy it. So what that lesson is basically highlighting is the fact that more than 7 out of 10 software deployments globally fail. People put money into a software, they buy it or they pay. But because they've not planned carefully how to make sure they get value from that investment and use the software well, the software is dumped on them. They don't know what to do. Because the moment you are using a new software and you have any issues, let's say you are trying to generate a report and things not coming out fast. Management want that report today. What do? You go back to your old way of doing it. You put it in Excel, you print it, you go and submit so that you will not go out into penalty. The moment we get used to doing things the old way, before you know what's happening, the software is abandoned. Nobody's using it again in the organization. So those are the issues that we highlighted there. Why do softwares fail? That's what that is basically talking about. People that deploy softwares don't get value from it in most cases. Very few are able to implement it properly. And that's because most people think the software in itself is the solution. The software is just a medium of solving your efficiency and effectiveness problem. Your data analysis, process streamlining, and modeling must have to be done by you before you upload them into the software. Software is a garbage in, garbage out situation. So if you don't plan carefully, your software deployment will fail. So that's the whole idea of avoiding those pitfalls that lead to such disastrous ends for software. I've seen software implementation in Nigeria when money had value of 500 million naira, 500 million. And they deploy it across so many branches. And within 6 months to 1 year, everybody has forgotten about that software. Because it was supposed to manage everything from their finances to their HRO, to their reporting, to their security monitoring, access control, to maintenance management. It was an integrated work management system, IWMS, that was all encompassing. But it was abandoned. Why? They started facing pockets of challenges because, one, the software was not built to suit them. They were trying to fit themselves into the software. Two, when they deployed the software, they didn't have a good change management program put in place. Software integration is one thing, change management is another thing. Software integration is when you have a consultant come in to show you how to do it, to hold your hands for the first few weeks of report generation and activity inputting into the software, and make sure all the data in the software is adequate or accurate. Then beyond that, change management is what you now need to do to ensure that people that should be using the software are actually using it on an ongoing basis. If you are budgeting for software, if the software on its own is 5 million naira, make sure you budget for up to 5 million naira to cover making sure that that software can work perpetually. So the whole change management process, the whole data cleanup and data inputting process must be done in such a way that everything is done accurately. Okay, so that's the whole idea of listing that for you. You're welcome. I want to just give you a little additional insight. For buildings that you manage or that you live in or that you work in, you will find out that technologies are grouped into 2 classes. There are the technologies that are built into the building. These technologies are things that the building has in itself, right? So at a basic level, you have switches on, off. That's a technology. It controls a light coming on and going off, right? You have simple things like valves that controls the flow of fluids within the building. You have simple things like remote controls for your ACs. Those are all basic level technologies, right? Now, as you move up above that, you start getting to technologies that help you monitor remotely. So you start talking about things like CCTVs and sensors, especially Internet of Things sensors. Now, the difference between the base level sensors and the Internet of Things sensors is that at the base level sensors, everything is either wired together into a hub, like a CCTV network, where you can look at the TV's various screens from one monitor. That's all sensors bringing videos and pictures for you. Then you also have those sensors you have inside your equipment, like the ones you have inside your elevator that gives you signs of what is happening, what level you are in, or a generator that tells you the temperature inside the engine, the oil level, and so on and so forth. Those are sensors, but they are all connected in such a way that they bring data to you at a certain interface for you to see. Now, going up above that, you have the building management system that is a centralized pooling of all sensors that gathers information from all parts of the building on multiple areas. For example, a BMS system can monitor where lights are on, where lights are off, can monitor sensors like temperature, carbon, CO2 sensors, humidity sensors, and so on across the building, can monitor the cooled water or chill water in a chiller system, can monitor so many things and bring those data to you in an interface. As a building management system, it's a standalone system in a building that when you go into a control room, you can use that system to see whether everything is working perfectly, things that are about to go wrong, or things that are already going wrong that you need to go and attend to. So a BMS is monitoring, brings data, but you don't then need to act as a manager. That's why it's a building management system. You will manage the data and the information the system brings to you, okay? If I find that the CO2 level in a certain server room in floor 2, for example, is now exceeding a certain amount of CO2, what comes to my mind is that the oxygen level has been depleted. And if people are going to go inside there to work or stay there, I don't want them to start becoming sick of having low oxygen level. My job then will be to open certain dampers in the air handling units to allow fresh air from outside to mix with the air that is going into that space. And as that air is going into that space, my building management system is monitoring the CO2 level. It is dropping because oxygen is now reaching that space. So I'm acting. That's what that particular BMS does. Now, for a BAS system, it is an advancement on the BMS. Why? Because the system itself now has a system of not only monitoring, but also controlling, which means what I should have in my brain that tells me if the oxygen level is dropped this low, open certain dampers and fresh air intake valves so that air can come in. I will do that. I reason that out. But that's in a BMS. In a BAS system, I don't need to. The system itself has been built with certain logic that will tell the dampers the CO2 level is too high, open and allow oxygen. And when the oxygen is coming in and is monitoring the oxygen level, it gets to a point it says oxygen level is enriched enough, you shut down. That valve that brings in oxygen should shut down, right? That is why we call buildings with BAS systems smart buildings. Smart buildings, intelligent buildings, or green buildings. So those are buildings that ensures that everything is done effectively, autonomously. You as a facility manager in an automated building that has a BAS system, you don't need to do much unless there's a major crisis. The building runs itself. It will increase temperature to make sure that the ambient temperature set points of 23 degrees for people working in a certain hall or a certain office is always 23 degrees. If people reduce from that space, it will warm the place up a little bit. to compensate for, or it will reduce the cooling to compensate for the fact that the heat being generated by people is not enough. And that temperature, if it continues cooling at that rate from 100 people to 20 people, the temperature of that place will drop so cold that people will become, freezing in that space. So what are we saying here? That system automatically does the work of a human brain, because a human brain is now built into it. When it's daylight, put off all security lights. When it's nighttime, put on all security lights. When somebody's not in this room, put off all lights, put off all ACs. All the system needs is just a sensor that says the last person has left, right? And then everything starts shutting down on its own. But if it's a BMS system, I'll have to observe the dashboard and see that everybody have left, and then I'll start using the controls to put in. So that's the difference between a BAS system and a BMS system. Now, the BAS system, like the BMS system, is built into the building, okay? So such that you now have that control within the building. But today, what is now common in the market, or what is current now, is the fact that you can have all of that data, all of those sensors now available to the internet. So so there are two sides to it. You have the sensors that tell you what is. That's the monitoring sensors, right? And then you now have the controllers that are connected to a switch, to a valve, to a temperature gauge, or whatever it is, so that if a sensor brings information into the central system to say people have left, the system will decide and send information to the controller. That controller will switch off the AC and switch off the lights in that automated system, right? That's a BAS system. Both a BMS system and a BAS system that you can access outside the building is because each of the sensors and the controllers are now independently connected to internet through IP. So what it means is that the switches are no longer just switches that are wired to a control point in the building. The switches now have access to the internet, where their information is fed into the internet, and remotely from your house in Abule Egba, you can switch off all the ACs in your building in Victoria Island when you know that there's nobody in that place. So you can see from your phone or your laptop that people have left the conference room, but for some reason, the 10-ton air conditioning is still on. Then you switch it off because of Internet of Things. So that is now a higher layer on top of whether a BMS or a BAS that gives you remote access through the internet at every point. So all of the information are now fed into a cloud where you can have analytics software to control and manage them. So I've just walked you through one aspect of the technologies that are built into the building. We start from simple controls to a building management system, which monitors, gives you manual control opportunities, right? And then to BAS systems, which are automated to control themselves and make the building reason and act smartly, intelligently, and save you energy, right? To Internet of Things that could be BMS or BAS type in structure, but gives you remote access outside the environment of that facility, because all of that information and database are no longer left within a module within the complex, but now fed into the cloud or into the internet that you can see from wherever you are. That's the Internet of Things. So you can say building technology from the standpoint of the building itself is simple controls to the BMS, to the BAS, to the IoT. Okay, and within those layers, you can have all kinds of applications: leak detection, traffic flow rate detection, parking automation that tells you where there are cars, or so you can just drive the shorter distance. to the nearest lot, you know, and so on and so forth. So the other side to technology is managing the facility. What are the tools you use to manage the facility? So you start from the basic level of logbooks. They fill their attendance into logbooks. Visitors fill a logbook. You migrate from there to a spreadsheet where you can now fill all those information into a spreadsheet. You can now do some trending, some graphical analysis, take some business decisions based on certain numbers and time of day and time of week when things happen, right? That's second level, logbooks and paper work orders to spreadsheets. From there, we now decide to start the process of improving our technology to automation. So we started using CMMS. CMMS is basically maintenance. That's why it's called Computerized Maintenance Management System, CMMS. That's the basic level of FM software where automation is now built into your operations. So all your plans for maintenance, all your assets are registered, are logged in, your spare parts and inventory warehouse are logged in, how they are used, they are all cataloged inside. Every work order is generated from that system. That's basically a maintenance software. But the computer-aided facility management encompasses all of facility management. So CAFM is not CMMS. CMMS is just maintenance. That maintenance is one of the things that we do in facility management. So CMMS is part of a CAFM, like you explained, one of you in your takeaway, right? But in addition to that, you plan space, it is done there. You do visitor management, it is done there. Access control, it is done there. Security and CCTV, it is done there. Health and safety, audit and inspections, it is done there. Financial management, it is done there. Budgeting and cost control is done there. Vendor management is done. You can just go on and on and on and on about all the things you do in the full spectrum of facility management. So that's why we call that one computer-aided facility management. Okay, so that's CAFM. It's a step up from CMMS. Then from that CAFM, you have the one that we call the IWMS, Integrated Work Management System. Integrated Work Management System. So while you still keep putting data and information into CAFM or CMMS, in an Integrated Work Management System, IWMS, that system is a management system that is capable of actually being integrated to your building automation. So your BMS or your BAS can actually feed in directly into your IWMS. For example, you can have your meter readings. In CAFM and CMMS, you have to take your meter reading and enter them regularly. But you can have your meter, digital meter IP address connected into your IWMS system. You can have your bank accounts connected into your IWMS system so that if a vendor works for you and you have verified that his work has been done, you can issue a payment to the bank through your IWMS system. It's more robust. It's an enterprise facility management software. You can do all your appraisals. So everything that is a CAFM can do, a IWFM, Integrated Work Management System, IWMS, can do, right? So, and this is what we're talking. So that is the top end of the management. So if I'm taking this side of technology, I'll start from logbooks and paperwork orders to spreadsheets, to CMMS, to CAFM, all the way to IWMS. I hope this is clear.
Please come again on your last statement, sir.
So if we're to take the right side of the technology for the buildings, right? You know, the left side I said is technology for the building itself, right? The right side, I'm talking about the technology for managing the building. I said you go from work orders and logbooks on paper to spreadsheets in Excel and simple computer software we use, all the way to computerized maintenance management system, CMMS, all the way to CAFM, which is the computer-aided facility management, and then to integrated work management system, which is the ultimate. So that is the evolution. So you look at yourself and say, where am I on the building technology? Am I still in controls and switches? Or have I moved on to the BMS level? Or have I moved on to the BAS level? Or am I at the IoT level? That's how you are moving in terms of the technology for the building. Then how you manage the building? Where am I? Am I in logbooks and paperwork orders? Level 1 technology. Am I in spreadsheets? At least I now have data that I can make decisions with. I can do analysis. Level 2 technology. Am I in CMMS, where my maintenance, at least what people know me for, is now automated? Level 3 technology. And then, or am I in CAFM, where all my entire facility management activities are logged in? Or am I now doing enterprise facility management at level of IWMS, right? So that's level 5. So basically you can track your technology levels as you move up the technology ladder.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Okay, do we have any solutions you seek? Any questions from this week's work or experience? Not necessarily from the last lesson. I'll still be able to take about 10 minutes of solution session if you have a question. Okay, sounds like we are good. So I'm going to share my screen and get into today's class. But let's take a 5 minutes break, right, before we start today's class. I'll just share my screen and take a little break, okay? Is it 5 minutes already? I believe we should continue, right? So today we're looking at financial management. Why this topic is important is that facility managers spend a lot of money. And because we spend a lot of money, often we find it hard or difficult to justify all of the spending. In many organizations today, the facility manager is the one that is blamed for all the financial failures because we almost don't contribute to funding the organization. And yet, we end up as the ones who consume a lot of the funds that the organization gets. For example, in all of the overhead costs, apart from salaries, facility management is the second largest consumer of funds, operational and overhead funds in virtually almost all organizations. The investment in properties, operations and maintenance of these properties is the second largest expense category after HRO costs, right? Now, the other side to it is most owners, property owners, companies, business leaders, they can relate with how much it costs them to acquire the assets, 100 billion, 70 billion, 40 billion, right? But they can hardly relate with what it now requires to run the assets on an ongoing basis. This is a big challenge for facility managers. What this does basically is that you find yourself struggling to extract the minimum investment required to actually keep the buildings functional, maintain value of the building, and provide a conducive environment for the occupants. It becomes a struggle. So how do we model the ongoing costs? If a building is built today at X amount, what is the ongoing cost on a year-to-year basis that must be planned for to keep that building running? Certain benchmark studies have put that number at 3.5%. 3.5%, which is 3.5% of the acquisition costs should be spent yearly to operate the building as a minimum. In some cases, it can be up to 10% yearly that should be set aside, depending on how large, how sophisticated that building is. In addition to that, you now have additional costs that in some cases are much higher depending on the situation you find yourself. For example, energy costs will not be the same all over the world. In places like Nigeria, where energy cost is really high because you are self-generating and self-producing power, then of course you will need to deal with that. The point of all of this is, as facility managers, we should not get into this bandwagon of this is how much a particular property costs, because that cost that is obvious at the onset is only the initial cost. Every property have what we call the total cost of ownership, which is the initial cost of design, construction, and delivery, in addition to all the ongoing costs over the entire life cycle of the building, the labor, the energy, the water, the cleaning, the maintenance, security, admin, operating expenses that go into that building. They are what we call the ongoing costs. It is a combination of the initial costs and the ongoing costs calculated for the 50, 60, 100 years expected life cycle of that building that we add up to form what we call the total cost of ownership. So as at the time you are building a 1 billion naira building, know that that is only one component of your real investment. There are ongoing costs that you are going to accumulate over the useful life of the asset, and you must be made aware of those costs, carefully simulated and not hidden, like the case of the iceberg. Most developers or property owners or MDs or CEOs will easily relate to that ice on top of the water. This is what we are investing. We're investing 1 billion to build this property. Yay, that's a lot of money, right? The FM is often not considered at this point when they are doing this modeling, and that's the point I need to make first. And then there will be other analysis that we're going to talk about as we go on in this lesson today, that is going to help you see practical applications of TCO so that you can be able to use that to make business cases and defend your budget requests and other things in terms of changes required during design and construction stage that will make the ongoing costs to become cheaper, right? Now, there's a point I also need to make here. If you try to calculate all of the ongoing costs over 100 years and compare it to the initial cost of design and construction of most edifices or structures or facilities you find around the world, you will realize that the initial design cost is often somewhere around 10% of the total cost of ownership. What this means is, if you have a 1 billion naira construction project to delivery point, be rest assured that the total cost of ownership of that facility for you as the owner is 10 billion. In essence, you'll be ready to spend 9 billion over a 100-year period, because your goal is to ensure that this building remains in top shape, keeps meeting its desired outputs for which it was designed and built, and ensure that asset value is preserved. You must plan to spend all that money in. And that is where FMs are different from most other professionals. Most other professionals in the built environment, they think about the delivery costs, and that's where the story ends for them, right? But for us, that's where the story starts. And because that's where the story starts, we know that the funds we are going to use to operate and maintain will either be wide and large or be minimal and easy to manage, depending on how the construction and design was done. So you see why I said TCO is very important to the FM. If the owner decides to use certain materials that breaks down or that packs up in less than a few years, right? Your operational maintenance cost is going to go up. If they decide to put certain assets in places where you cannot easily get access to them over the course of your operations and maintenance, your cost of running the assets will keep going up. So in essence, what I'm saying here is that you need to pay attention to the initial activities that brings about the creation of your facility. So you don't end up with a facility that you, as a facility manager, will end up spending 2-3 times what your mates or managers of similar buildings will spend, because you've ignored the design and construction aspects, and they have built it in such a way that they were quick, delivered fast, but you are not having to spend double amount to maintain and operate. You just be a culprit in a game, a pawn in a game that you're not playing. And that's where the first point I want to help you understand. So please pay attention to this. Everything you do, think about total cost of ownership. In the procurement class, we're also going to learn about how to apply total cost of ownership and life cycle cost analysis when you are doing purchases of other assets, not just a whole building assets. If I'm going to buy air conditioning, LG or Hisense, Samsung or Sony, or Panasonic or whatever, depending on the specification I'm looking for, what are my considerations? I must use total cost of ownership to compare. It doesn't make sense saying, oh, 2 horsepower LG is 250,000, 2 horsepower LG is Panasonic is 300,000. Therefore, I will buy LG of 250,000 because it is cheaper. That is a consideration of only half of the picture, which is the initial cost in comparing those two assets. You must make up data for your ongoing costs. For example, how many kilowatt hours will these assets consume over the 12 hours it is run each day? How will it be operated? Is it something that can be operated remotely, or somebody has to come in on site? How much will it cost to bring this person to site? Are there maintenance activities that must be performed? What's the cost of maintaining this? What's the cost of maintaining the other one, right? You are doing all of those analysis, what we call the total cost of ownership estimation, so that you can now confidently say A is cheaper than B. Why do you think many FMs will come up to management and say, oh, let's go for this one, it's cheaper? Management will say, no, it's not cheaper. You know why? Management often have done the analysis themselves, and that is where FMs are failing. You're supposed to be the one doing the total cost of ownership calculations to say, this is the real cost of ownership. This one will last 5 years or 10 years, and this is everything that will go into it, from acquiring to salvage value at the end of the day. Okay? All right, so let's look at guidelines for FM financial operations. Many of us work in organizations where we have to relate with finance team, with accounting teams, where we have to, send in quotations, requests to buy this and that, budget approvals, and so on and so forth. There are often all kinds of rifts, crisis generated when you get to a point where the FM is trying to say, oh, this is very important. Let the client is on our neck to do this and that. And then the guys in the finance department are saying, we don't have money. Or go and follow the process, fill your books, and you're saying, no, bypass the process. There's no need for all those bureaucracy now. This is why we are here. We must do. No. It's not necessary. No need for those kind of conflict. You must learn how to work with finance. And that's why I appreciate it when finance and accounts people come into FM classes, so that they can learn. The objectives become the same. The reasons for doing the things you do becomes the same. Priorities are now set the same way. But you as a facility manager must learn how to do your part. And the first thing is ensure that you as a facility manager understand the organization's mission and how the FM budget and financial decisions move the organization toward that mission. Many FMs will come up with a list of all the things they want to spend money on, and not be able to link any of those items directly or indirectly into what matters most to senior management. That is a major failing. That's why you're not getting approved. And I keep saying, for an FM, if you're not getting approved, you are failing. So if I need to do something, no matter how obvious it is to everybody in the organization, I need to be able to show that that investment or that project is going to add value. And please don't come up with your own, how will I put it, your own conjured up value. I see an FM coming up to say, oh, well, if we do this, workers will be very happy. And when they are very happy, that means they'll be more productive. And when they are more productive, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not an objective way of linking up that particular project with productivity. Because the only way you can link it up with productivity is if you can tell that it makes people stay at work, for example. It makes people not have inconveniences and not complain. And because they're not complaining, you believe they are focusing on their job. But again, that productivity that you are trying to tie the project or the investment or the spending to must be an aspect of the organization's strategic objectives, which come out of the organization's mission. You know what we did the FM strategy planning class? We talked about the organization's purpose being the customer, the corporate strategy, which has to do with vision at the highest level, the destination, mission at the next level, how you get there, the path to your vision, and then your strategic objectives, which are milestones breakdown of your mission, how you're going to implement the various activities that will take you in your mission to your vision. And a facility manager should be able to tie his spending to such level of analysis of the organization's purpose, mission, vision, and strategic objective. The team that work in finance, they do a lot of prioritization on your behalf. You tend to see them as trying to save the organization from your recklessness, isn't it? And whenever there's an argument between the finance team and the FM team, management will often defer to the finance team because for some reasons, they are the ones that speak the language of management better. For example, a finance manager will know that there is funds of a certain amount somewhere. You are the FM, you yourself know that that money is available. For example, a client paid yesterday and no major spending has gone out today, right? So your expectation is that when you bring a bill to buy 10,000 liters of diesel today, they will easily approve it and release the funds because you and I know that there's money. Why are they not releasing the fund? But the finance guys can actually tell you there is no money. Stick by it and management will support them, right? First is because they are more into management, speak the language of management. They understand the implications of certain cash flow decisions that need to be made. For example, there's an expense that needs to be paid for in 2 weeks' time. By their cash flow projection, it's not likely that they're going to make a revenue that would, if we spend this one on you today, we'll get that one before 2 weeks. They will tell you there's no money because that money that's on ground is being kept for something that is so critical that if we don't do it in 2 weeks, we might have to file for bankruptcy, or we might be evicted from our property, or we might have some serious case to deal with, right? So they will prioritize on your behalf. Now that prioritization will now need to be influenced by your leadership skills, because when they make those decisions on your behalf, if you are not the likable type, you don't have a rapport with your finance teams, you will find yourself almost always at their wrong side, where they are always telling you there's no money, okay? But if you have a good rapport, there's a high likelihood that they will spend time understanding your division or department, what you are trying to achieve, and see how they can meet you halfway. This is not an obligation to them. It's just because they like you, they will not discuss and say, okay, can you ask the vendor, for example, if he can take 10% deposits, deliver now, and then in 2 weeks' time, we'll give him 50% of the balance, and then another 2 weeks, we'll give him the balance. Ask him if he's happy to take that. They will do that with you if you have good rapport with them. Otherwise, it will be a case of, well, we don't know how you're going to get diesel, but we can't fund you now because there's no money. Okay? You need to also have a clearly defined roles in the FM budgeting process. You need to understand how budgeting is done in your organization. Is it top down or is it bottom up? The top down is where management creates the budget, pass it to you with a certain set of objectives, and ask you to implement them. So you not create the tactics and the activities to implement that budget. The bottom up budget is the budget that you and your team at the shop floor developed, and you bring them up to management to approve, right? And then when there's a budget, how much approval does the budget need? A budget is not a forecast. A budget is a real financial document the organization uses. And that's why you can be penalized when you overspend your budget or when you underspend your budget. Because at the end of the day, a budget is a control tool, right? So you must understand how this process works. You must also understand how the approval and turnaround time for approval for spend goes in your organization. Somebody will say, oh, well, the last time I applied for 200,000, it was only 3 days, it was approved. This time you're applying for 20 million and you also expect it in 3 days to be approved. That means you don't understand what's going on, right? You need to have a firm grasp of how your organization manages approval processes. So you don't end up coming to say, oh, is this bureaucracy in this organization that is making things to fail? I've applied for 3 days now, they've not responded, no approval, blah, blah, blah. If you know how the organization runs, you know that you need to apply 2 weeks in advance. Somebody asked me, how can I, my diesel tank is 2 weeks supply. How can I apply for diesel in 2 weeks when that's all that the diesel supply I have on ground? I said, the moment somebody is delivering diesel to you, since you now know that it takes 2 weeks or maybe 10 days to get approval to buy diesel, as the diesel is coming into your organization, you are preparing the purchase request for another batch of diesel, because you know that that batch of diesel will go through a 10-day cycle within your organization before it gets back to you to issue to the vendor to supply. So why do you need to fight the process? Your job is to understand the process and work proactively to ensure that you meet the requirements of the process. And then you must maintain clear, well understood and documented financial handling process. This is everything from who pays the vendor, how much is your limits for working funds, for example, or flexible site operations funds. How do you retire them? If you don't know how to retire it, or you come back from a trip, for example, you don't retire the funds using the appropriate tools for it, you may end up getting into trouble with your organization. Facility managers should keep accurate financial records. It's important that you are busy focusing on your operations, and every time you need something, you just place an order with procurement to go and do it. And when procurement gets it done, finance will pay once they say it's been done, right? Now, that sounds simple enough, but you as a facility manager already have a budget. And so at some point, you will need to be watching your budget vis-a-vis your spending. So you must keep your own independent, accurate records of what is happening to your operations in terms of costs. And then you must also have historical data for trending and forecasting. For example, a certain air conditioning unit has been going, I've been getting repairs every 3 days for the last 1 month. Because you are compiling those historical data, you can come to management and say, we have visited this air conditioner for 10 days, 10 times this last month. It has cost us so and so amounts. At this rate, this is when we would have spent what it would have cost us to buy a brand new one. But you can't make such a case if you're not keeping accurate and timely operational and capital budget data. And then know how to discern the managerial implications of external and internal financial statements. Now, facility managers may not know that if our companies, our organizations are trending upwards or they are going bust, the details are available to us in the annual financial plans or annual financial reports of your organization. So as facility managers, we must know how to look at a financial report and get a sense whether our organization is going up financially or going down. An organization could be making a lot of profit, but all that profit is tied up in debt. They don't have cash to deal with their immediate obligations. That is a direct threat to the FM's operation. So the FM must understand how to read financial statements. They are not very, very complex. Things like balance sheet, profit and loss, and so on and so forth. And then you have all of those terminologies they put into financial statements that you all need to find time to study and become familiar with. That's the whole essence of this discussion. So I've talked about life cycle costing. You need to determine in present value terms all costs incident to the planning, design, construction, operation, and maintenance, and disposition of a structure over time. They involve the analysis of the cost of a system or a component over its entire life. Life cycle costing and the total cost of ownership are very similar, right? Total cost of ownership is just talking about all the costs that goes into it, both hidden, direct, indirect costs, all kinds of costs, right? We use the data of total cost of ownership to do life cycle cost analysis. So if you've done a total cost of ownership, which means you have calculated the starting costs, the first year, second year, third year running costs, and you've added them all together using the time value of money. So what that means is that if you bought it at 100,000 and every year you'll be maintaining it with 10,000, right? What total cost of ownership says, using the net present value terms, is that today's 1 naira is not the same thing as tomorrow's 1 naira, okay? So if I'm standing here today and I want to find out tomorrow's 1 naira, is it going to be higher or lower? Can somebody unmute and tell me? Is tomorrow's 1 naira going to be higher or lower if I'm going to add it to today's 1 naira? I need an answer.
It will be higher.
It will be lower.
Okay, if you say
it will be lower with the present rate.
It will be lower compared to the present value.
Okay,
we are praying to God to help us change it.
No, this is pure. This is not even about Nigeria. This is global. The answer is one answer. If you say tomorrow's money in my hand today is going to be higher, please explain.
Get the analogy. It's going to be lower.
Oh, okay, it's going to be lower because in future, inflation and other factors would have come into play. But right now, we can assume it can be invested, and when you invest it, it can even, be much higher.
Now, your second point is the valid point. Okay, if I want to have 1 naira next year, today, if I have 70 kobo and I put it in an investment, by next year, I will have my 1 naira. That's the reason. That's why tomorrow's money in my hand today is smaller. Okay, so that's the main reason. So it's not about any economy or anything. Every tomorrow's naira is definitely smaller today. Now, this is one consideration that I try to give students to think through. If I'm flipping this now, you are now the service provider. A customer wants to pay you 1 million naira today so that you will clean his office every year for 24 years. He will give you this 1 million naira now, but you will be obliged, you and your generations to come, to clean his office every year for 24 years. Or you will sign a contract that says he will give you 100,000 every year for 24 years. No matter what happens, you will keep getting 100,000 naira and you must keep cleaning the office. Which one is a better deal for you? The 1 million naira today to clean for 24 years, or the 100,000 naira every year for 24 years with no change? Please give reasons for your answers.
On my home part, I will go for 1 million naira now.
Okay.
I collect the money, then I invest the money. I let the money work for me.
Okay.
Probably from the interest or the returns on the investments, I will be paying the staff, and I will be doing every other thing. Getting my money costs.
Okay. All right.
I will be paying the tax and all those things.
Thank you. Fantastic. I hear you lying. That was a fantastic answer. Let me hear from the group that wants to take the 100,000 every year, because it sounds like in 24 years you'd have collected 2.4 million instead of 1 million. So explain.
Let me just try.
Okay.
Because if you say, if like I am thinking it should be 100,000 every year, because the value of 100,000 in future will be different from the value that it is today. It will be higher.
No, it is lower.
It will be lower.
Far lower.
It will be lower, but it will be relevant for the now, for that moment.
Now, so this is the point. you know, what you buy with your 100,000 naira today, in 24 years, you probably need 15 million to buy it.
Yeah.
So in essence, your 100,000, your 100,000 today, at the 23rd year, when you get your 100,000, it's equivalent to probably 3,000 naira. In fact, that whole year you will work for 3K of today's 100,000 naira, right? So if you were to add up, today's value of every year's 100,000, using your 4 figures table to look at discount rate into the future, next year is 90,000, 2 years time is 80,000, 3 years time is 70,000. I'm just giving you, I'm not using the 4 figures table now to come up with all the multiple years. If I do 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, down to 24 years, I probably will get to 1,000 naira at some years. If I add all of those 1, 3, 7, 20, 50, 70, 90 up together, I may not even get it as 1 million, because my 1 million today, I'm now comparing it to all the 100,000s of 24 years. If I use future value of money, which is depreciating or diminishing, I may not even have 1 million first. So that's my number one reasoning why I would take the 1 million, mostly if I can do my calculation. So my answer will be, I will first do my calculation using present value to estimate what future 100,000 will be, and then add them up, and then compare it to my 1 million. Okay, so that's my first approach. My second approach is to go with Olayemi's answer and say, what is my internal rate of return? If I take the 1 million now, and between now and next year, I can make 100,000 on top, and there's a likelihood that I can keep making 100,000 every year when I invest 1 million. It means that at the end of 24 years, I will still have my 1 million. And yet, I have taken the 100,000 from every year from the investment or savings that the 1 million gave me. So that is, so for us as facility managers, we should start thinking about how to use financial costing mechanisms instead of just pushing things that don't add up to management. Joan, go ahead with your question.
Okay, good evening, sir. What of a situation where you have something to peg that 100,000 inflow to? Yes. Take, for example, I have a particular expense that I must incur in the next 24 years, or in the next, that same period, or every almost year. That same period. Yes. Now, so it becomes beneficial to me to take that 100,000 every year. Anyway, what I'm trying to explain is there's what we call matching cost. So you match your benefit against your cost. So if you draw up your IRR and then you still look at your expense, look at the business entirely, it now makes sense to decide which of these options to go for. Makes more business sense. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So the point here is that you must do your analysis, okay? And the two analyses I just gave you may have more analysis to do, but the two analyses I gave you is the first one where I said, use net present value to compute what every year's 100,000 will be, right? And add it all up to see whether it compares to the 1 million, right? Second one is what my investment returns will be, because I may have a compulsory 100,000 to spend every year. No problem. But will this 1 million be paying me this 100,000 every year? If you can pay me that 100,000 every year, then I'm fine. So in essence, what I'm saying is, if you do your analysis well, you will go to management with the answer that meets management's yearning or expectation. You will not be proposing something that is different from what management expects. Many of us will argue with management about time value of money, for example, when you say, let's pay a deposit to this vendor so that he will take a lower cost from us. A vendor wants to do a job for 1 million. Another vendor wants to do that same job for 1.5 million, right? The one that wants to take 1 million from us, we will pay him upfront. The one that wants to do it for 1.5 million, can come and take his money after 90 days. The FM will say, let's save the 500,000 on top by going for the one that will give money now to do the job for us, right? You are not saving 500,000. If you know what your organization can do with 1 million in 90 days, if it is 1 naira more than 500,000, I will pay 1.5 million to the guy who is going to wait for his money so that I can use the value I get to even generate the money I'm going to give him and make my profit on top. Compared to the one that wants to give him for me for cheap, but I have to give him funds up front to do it. Facility managers need to understand this as financial basics. So while this class may not be able to go into a lot of scenarios where we have practical opportunity to do calculations, use your spreadsheets, your Excel. When you are on Excel, go to open, click on those templates there, and do amortizations and do a spread of funds over time to get a sense of whether your decision is going to make sense or not. So like in the case I gave you about buying between two brands, one is cheaper by 50,000. Should I go for it and tell management, oh, this is cheaper? Sometimes we sound hollow when we say, why are we going to buy the one of 200,000 when we have the one of 150? You are only considering initial cost. You are not using total cost of ownership and therefore not doing life cycle cost analysis. So we use it to compute alternatives. We compare risk and uncertainty, and then we also identify alternatives and estimate cost using LCCA. And this is important for us to, as FMs, learn. Another application of the cost of ownership concept is the fact that when you have a facility at the various stages of facility advancement or life cycle, the cost savings opportunity will be dwindling and the opportunity cost of error or error correction will be increasing. Take that example of the building that you've just erected. No slab on every level where air conditioning outdoor units can be kept. So during construction, they use scaffold all around the building. That same scaffold covered them when they were painting, when they were installing windows, when they were putting cladding, and they mounted ACs with it. It didn't sound like an extra cost. Why should we go and build a slab or construct an extension to the building, which is very expensive structurally, so that we can hang or drop AC units there? Why don't we just, now that we have this scaffold, drop the ACs all over the building, 6 floors with elevator, and then you have ACs all, stapled, pasted all around the building. When you as a facility manager now want to maintain those ACs, are you going to be setting up scaffold around the building every 3 months? Because during construction, people didn't think about that. Now, your cost savings opportunities keep dwindling because your cost of operations will keep rising. Every time you want to do an AC servicing of 3,000 naira, you go and get a scaffold of 90,000 naira to get to it. Right? So if you have been there when that building was being designed, and somebody says, no need to build that slab, we can use scaffold to mount AC, and you ask the question, are we going to use scaffold to maintain ACs over the next 100 years? That is the kind of question that helps you look at graphs like this. You can save that little money now at the onset, but I can spend 50 times that in the cost of operating and maintaining this facility with all the inconveniences and risk attached to it. So in essence, always watch out for corrections to be done at the early stages. If you are designing a house and you find out that there's a need for a bigger kitchen, you've not dug foundation, what's the cost of correction? A new design. Architect, please take extra 100K, redesign my kitchen. I want it to be bigger. That store you have there, remove it, merge it to this bathroom, add this other room to it. I want the kitchen to be bigger. It's still on paper. But have you seen when they want to correct that kind of problem after the building has been built? When they start using new form works to hold the building in place so they can break certain walls off and create new arcs so that they can merge spaces together. The cost is like 200 times the cost of making that correction when it was still in design stage. It gets worse as the building advances. As at the time you are digging foundation during construction, of course you can say, okay, fine, let's do new strip foundation or do new raft foundation to take this extension and so on and so forth. But when you have finished roofing, plastering, painting, wiring, doing everything into the house, that's when you now want to make such a change. What would that cost look like? This is our reality in facility management. We need to take this message into our operations. We need to start getting involved with valid points. Many of us keep saying, oh, FM should be involved from the beginning. FM should be involved, but we are not producing valid points to get them to listen to us and talk to us. These are the valid points I'm talking about. And if you have been involved in the process of taking over estates and onboarding people into the estates, and you start seeing all of this error correction, document them, catalog them, have a historical data that you can use to buttress the fact that your input should be acquired early enough in the process. Because that's what's not happening. We're not having data to support our need to be on the table when decisions are being made during the early stages of the building or development life cycle. Another key financial decision that FMs will make in their career has to do with whether to acquire property or assets or to focus on what they really want. If I need electricity, I shouldn't be thinking about generator or transformers or inverters or solar. That's not what I'm thinking. Those are all a means to give me electricity. My first thought is I need electricity. How much of it? When to when? What quality? I state all that. Then I now ask further questions. What are the options out there for getting electricity? Connect to the public grid. Buy a generator. Diesel gen or gas gen. Install renewable energy, solar plants or solar system or wind turbines. All of these are talking about acquiring. What about plugging into someone else's assets? Public supply, hooking up, or an independent power plant. They've done all the power generation and they just hook up to give me only the electricity I want. Or what if I go ahead and lease the equipment instead of coughing out all the money to buy it at once? I pay on a monthly basis as my organization is making money. If I run a factory, for example, and the factory makes bread, we make 1 million loaves a month. 1 million loaves at 500 naira means that we're making 50 million or whatever the amount is at the end of the month, right? How much of that loaf, cost of making that loaf is the power that we use in making it? If I can work that out and I can have an organization lease me a gen, I don't have to cough out 17 million to buy it. I'd rather pay 350, 500,000 a month to rent the gen than to buy it. Why? Because I can link that 350 or 500,000 to every loaf of bread and say, my bread, the cost of power for my bread is 1 naira per loaf or 5 naira per loaf. And every month as I'm selling, I'm making the money and I'm dropping the one for power. I don't have any business owning power equipment that become complicated, that will start dying soon, or that will start giving me maintenance challenges. That's the way I reason. I want to go for lease. I could decide, you know what, I don't need the lease. I don't even want to be responsible for the equipment being on my site. I just want power. If you can run your power to my place, I guarantee you I will buy 1,000 kilowatt hours per day, because my oven runs, on a higher current than that. I can even pay for more power from you. And the other investor decides to invest in his equipment and run the power to you. It is only when you see power that you pay. No equipment is involved. So instead of starting your thinking with what can I buy in terms of equipment or assets, start your thinking with what do I really want to gain? What is the real utility I want? Okay, and several considerations come in here. We talked about the life cycle cost analysis. Let's also look at the tax implications. Some organizations, in fact, the way taxes are calculated globally is such that your capital investments are often discounted. What does this mean? It means that your capital investments are not applied to the current year's profit and loss as a whole. The capital investment is often spread in such a way that they use depreciation or amortization for it. The accountants in the house will know this very well. So that the amount that hits this year's profit and loss is just the ratio or the share of that asset that contributes to this year's profit and loss. So when John was talking about the matching principle, that's one of the application of the matching principle, where you have a 5-year useful life of a vehicle, for example. And when you buy it for 5 million, when they're asking you what's your vehicle cost for this year, and you're using a straight line depreciation, for example, you say my vehicle cost for this year is 1 million. Next year, 1 million again. Next year, 1 million again, and so on and so forth. Now, that way, you've spread that cost out, and your tax will be impacted by your books. The way your books look this year is how to arrange your tax. So there are some tax implications for high expenses. If your expenses are high, let's assume there is a 5 million expense for using Uber, for example. You cannot amortize that because all of that expense was run this year. And tax will be affected by how that calculations take place. The other consideration is the organization's cash position. If an organization has plenty of cash, such that we always have savings or surplus from our regular operations, I will not go for any vendor that wants to supply and come back for his money later at a higher cost, because I have surplus cash. In fact, I'll be paying deposits and paying upfront, so as I use that as a bargaining chip. I've worked with an oil and gas organization where if they have to pay your invoice in 90 days, and you now say, I want my money earlier, they have an option to take 2.5% off your total invoice to pay you in 2 weeks. What are they basically saying? They're basically saying that we want to make money from the money in our reserve. So for us to give you money early, we will take something from you, because what we call cost of funds applies to cash flow. If my cash is lean, that I'm even borrowing money to run my operations, I'll be happy to have all my vendors work, provide supplies and deliverables and value for me, and then get paid later. So if they have provided the services and I've fed my customers and they are satisfied and they have paid me and I have money to pay my vendors, I'm not I'm not constraining myself when it comes to cash, because at that point, I don't build up, I don't have to go and borrow money, basically. So cash position will determine whether you want to buy an asset, or whether you want to lease, or whether you want to acquire just the utility. Instead of putting out 17 million to buy a generator, rent 500,000. You might say, oh, 500,000 a month means 6 million a year, and in just 3 years, the gen will still have 5 years on it. Why would I want to spend my 18 million in 3 years, and yet I'm not the owner of the generator? Don't forget that for every month you spend 500,000, you have not spent 17.5 million. So assume you actually have that 17.5 million. What can you do with that 17.5 million in 1 month that will give you 500,000? Why do I want to buy a generator of 17.5 million or 18 million when I can just pay for the gen and not cough out all that money at once, and use that money for my internal operations and my business so that I can grow it? So that's where cash position comes in. FMs, we often sit as outsiders to the organization. We don't really understand what's happening to our organization. We don't have a clue as to the financial situation of our organization. So we keep coming with, we need to buy, we need to construct, we need to acquire, we need to acquire. And that is leaving us really, really down the strategy ladder. Management will not consult us when they know that all we think about is one-sided approach to do things. And then the cost of alternative decisions. Once you've done your analysis and you have the various alternatives in place, you can now do a life cycle cost comparison. For example, I'm paying 500,000 every year for so number of years. I will now use this year's 500,000 as 500,000 and use next year and subsequent years 500,000 as their own value and add up. Once I've compared, once I have that option on one side, I will now say, how much will it cost me to buy outright? Now, I will now compare the two. Because if I'm not doing this kind of comparison, I will not be able to make recommendations that management will accept as valid or carefully thought through analysis. All right, I want to go into this other concept of cost. Facility managers, we deal with cost all the time. We manage estates and we share bills, and there's always all kinds of stories about how the bill is not effectively not shared according to equity. Some people feel cheated. I've had one estate where somebody says, oh, I'm on the ground floor. Why should I be paying for elevator for people who are going up and things like that? And we have all kinds of issues, right? We need to understand how costs are accumulated. If we understand how costs are accumulated, it will be easier to make justifications as to why certain cost allocation or certain cost assignment considerations, how we arrived at those. You may be operating a multi-tenanted facility, and you are trying to decide. I just finished on one meeting this afternoon on levelized energy costs for an estate where I have some property, and the argument was intense. 3 straight hours, and we're going around in circles. At some point, I got really, really frustrated. Why? There are certain costs that can be directly traced to a product or service called direct costs. There are certain costs that cannot be directly traced to it. They are called indirect costs because they will be associated to other items, but partially associated to this item that we are considering. In some cases, it's a cost that keeps coming over and over and over on that particular cost object or that item we're trying to estimate. The moment you are not able to uncouple direct from indirect costs, you have already created questions and commas in the minds of people. And before you know what's happening, your cost allocation, cost assignment spreadsheet, and your analysis falls apart. So direct costs, they can be specifically traced to an item or activity. They can be easily and accurately traced to that cost object. If I'm doing cleaning, for example, my cleaning for your space that I'm cleaning for you has a certain dedicated staff. That staff salary is a direct cost. Has certain quantities of chemicals and certain quantities of other things that goes into it and materials that are used. That is direct. Now, there are other clients that I'm also servicing. They have similar direct costs. But direct cost is not everything that goes into the cleaning service. The managers that come from the office, that develop processes and procedures, that come with instructions, come to inspect and do quality assurance on all these sites, they have a cost. This cost, we may call it overhead cost, but there must be a way to ascribe an aspect of that overhead cost into that particular cost of it. So if Mr. A, client A, wants to know exactly his cost of cleaning, I cannot say it is 70,000 because there's one cleaner of 35K and there are materials of 35K. No, I can't say that. I have to find a way to allocate some of the so-called overhead costs that is not directly related to it into that account. So I can share that information and say, this is now your total cost. So to get total cost, you must know what direct costs are and what indirect costs are, so that you can add up direct and indirect costs to end up with your total cost, so that you don't make that mistake of assuming direct costs as the only cost for a particular cost object. Now to the issue of best value. Every time you spend money, you come back to ask yourself, what value have we acquired with that spending? Okay. Every time you spend money and you discover that someone else did it cheaper, you are haunted by the fact that you have lost value or lost money. Anytime you spend money and you realize that it was the wrong quality or it did not meet the need for which you spend that money, you say, I threw away that money. It's value lost. Best value extends the conventional wisdom pairing value and money, and instead implies a need to continually strive for something superior at the lowest practicable cost. So if I were to put best value in my own simple definition, I would say specification at the lowest price. So don't see lowest price or cheapest solution as a problem. See your major challenge as being able to specify exactly what you want. If I want a wired mouse, because I like the fact that it does not need a battery. I like the fact that it does not disconnect and reconnect over and over through Bluetooth that the wireless one does. I like the fact that I can get used to it and use it for a long time and not have any issues with it. I'm specifying. I don't mind that the cable stretches around the table and causes a little bit of clumsiness. I don't mind that. I've defined my specification. As soon as I go out to get a mouse, I must make sure that all my specifications are checked. For each option I'm comparing, it is only after I have checked that the specification I've itemized have been checked that I can now say I am comparing this mouse with this mouse. This is a HP mouse. This is a Microsoft mouse. Do they both meet all of my specifications? If they do, which one is cheaper? That's best value. If while doing this, my comparison, I now find a third mouse that has lights for nighttime work, so I can be easily see all my buttons to click in the night when it's dark. Don't forget that I did not list night lights into my specification originally. If I go for that third item, because of that extra feature, and I end up paying maybe just 500 Naira extra for that one, I have lost value. Because I did not buy the cheapest that met my specification. If I now want to add that night light to my specification, automatically my Microsoft and my HP mouse would have lost out. They are no longer in comparison. I will pick this new one that I have picked and say, oh, this one has night lights. I will go and look for another one or two or three that also have night lights. It is them that I must now compare to pick the cheapest one. Every time you do all of those analysis of, oh, there's a nice to have feature, that's why I went for this other one, you are making a mistake. It is no longer best value. You must go for the cheapest that meets all of your specifications. And that's why I call a specification is that when we talk about superior quality, it's you or your customer that decides what superior quality is. Once you fully understand what that superior quality is, that becomes your specification. And so the cheapest item or solution that can meet that specification is best value. So don't despise going for cheap. Cheap is good, but you must be careful to ensure the specification is what? Right. Price and quality must match. Next concept we're going to look at in today's class is the concept of deferred maintenance costs. Okay, so where do we use this? You know, we said you must be proactive as a facility manager, which means you must pick up things, identify things that have broken, things that can break, prevent them from breaking in the future by being proactive in your approach to solving problems. It's fine. As you are picking all of those defects in your facility, you want to also be solving them as they come. The door handle was just shaking. Nobody had noticed it. Just a slight shaking. It needs a capital to tighten it or put the screw that goes across, that you put a nut or both at both ends so that it can lock in place. That's what you want to do. You pick that up. But it's just one door and just one screw. And calling the carpenter to come in all the way from his office with his tools and his men to come and do one door and one screw, it's not just practicable. So you say, you know what, I would allow this, for a while. When I find 5, 10 more other doors that I'll need to do this work on, I will create a work order to bring the carpenter in. At that moment, I have a reason for not doing that piece of work, but I must document it in a document called the deferred maintenance log. Your deferred maintenance log is a logging of all defects that have been picked up in your facility. In effect, it is the difference between your brand new facility and what your facility looks like and functions like today. That document is the difference, is the accounting for every defect, such that if we were to fix all defects today, your building will become brand new again. So your deferred maintenance log is actually the listing of all unaccomplished maintenance tasks. What am I trying to hammer here? Facility managers must have a deferred maintenance log that accounts for every defect in the facility. If your building quality is dwindling, toilets are not flushing well, leakage everywhere, lights are shocking, sockets are loose, the wall is dirty, ceiling is roof is leaking, ceiling is falling, it means that your deferred maintenance log is getting longer and longer and longer. So if I come to your facility and see your building really run down, no maintenance is taking place, your deferred maintenance log will be a whole book. But if I come and see your building is top shape, everything works, your deferred maintenance log will be 1 page or less. Where I'll have a problem with you is when I see your building is run down, your estate is run down, what your amenities are not functioning properly, your toilets are not functioning properly, and you don't have a document to account for it, then you are not a facility manager. That is a big problem. A very big problem. Now, what goes into this deferred maintenance log? Number one, the item or the defect itself. You itemize and break down. So you put a small description of the defect. For example, I have a cracked floor, right? I'll say cracked floor, and then I'll put a description. It's a tile floor, the tile is off, probably, and then a part of it is cracked, just to show that I understand what problem it is. I probably also have a picture to show that defect. And then I will now have a column where I put in my scope of repair. And then a column where I put in my cost of repair. If I had 20 naira today, I will fix it. But I'll also include a column where I will write reason for deferring it. Work is too small for work order. There's no funding for this work. I need to put that reason there. And then I will need to create another column for priority. This particular defect, what is the risk of not fixing it? What is the priority for it? Is it a health and safety issue? Is it emergency related? Is it operational? Does it frustrate our operations? Or is it just a cosmetic failure that we can ignore for a few weeks or months? Priority or criticality must be indicated. So once again, I'll make this outline. You probably won't have this outline in your slides. So if you have a pen, write down. Your deferred maintenance log should include 1, the defect as an item, a description of the defect, a picture of the defect, a scope of work to fix the defect, the cost estimates for fixing the defects, the reason is been deferred, and finally, the priority or criticality of that piece of work or that requirement. It will be running continuously. Any work that you do is crossed out. List shortens. As you do more inspections or customers raise more issues, you add. You keep doing it. Some organizations will call it the issues log, but the issues log might be more than the building. The issues log might be a certain nanny not allowing other nannies to use the crutch. They are fighting inside the nanny. It might include things like somebody says this room is hot and it's not hot. I'm feeling hot, I'm feeling cold. You can have a separate issues log. I'm talking of deferred maintenance. It only has to do with maintenance. So don't call it issues log. Okay. And then you can add more columns to the deferred maintenance log, like what was done to repair it, when it was done, other notes. You can add more, but you must have this spreadsheet all the time, okay? And why do we need the deferred maintenance log? Because we want to calculate what we call the Facility Condition Index, FCI. Please write it down. I'm wondering why the full definition of FCI is not on this slide. Facility Condition Index. Every asset will dwindle over time. It's called degradation curve. Even if you are maintaining very well, it will age, wear and tear, right? The condition cannot remain permanently the same. That's why you monitor condition index. But every time condition is dwindling, a defect, either a cosmetic, aesthetic defect, or a functional defect, component failure, or any kind of defect. That's why you need to do your deferred maintenance, because at any particular time, to calculate your facility condition index, you must have your deferred maintenance plus your capital renewal divided by your current replacement value. What this simply means is repair versus replace. What is the ratio? That's my FCI. If I have a gen, it needs overhauling, needs all kinds of repairs, blah, blah, blah. And if I spend 3 million fixing that gen, there's an alternative that I can buy a brand new gen for 7.5. Should I fix it for 3 million or should I buy a new one for 7.5? What the FCI does is that if I want to calculate my FCI, first I will say it's 3 million divided by 7.5 million. 3 million divided by 7.5 million will give me an FCI. And that FCI has a range, because it's a ratio. If it's up to 0.5, 0.05, it means it is good. What this simply means is that you are using 50,000 to fix instead of using 1 million to replace. That means your asset is close to new. It is fair if it is up to 10%. It means that you're using 100,000 to fix instead of 1 million to replace. That's fair. Up to 30%, the asset is becoming poor. It means you're using 300,000 to fix instead of 1 million to replace. Up to 60% is now critical. It means you are using 600,000 to repair instead of 1 million to replace. And once it crosses that, you are no longer even considering spending money on repair. It doesn't make sense spending 60% repairing. You know, many of us do this with our vehicles. The vehicle is now old, the engine, the body, everything. They say, oh, we'll just do everything for you for 1 million. So, the price is fair. And then there's another equivalent car, age but in a better condition, at least in the same condition you bought yours for 2 million. Will you put 1 million into repairing your old car, or will you go and buy the next car for 2 million? Your FCI is telling you that once you have crossed that 30% repair and upgrade costs, then you have begun to make a mistake. You are falling into the mistake era. So this is a decision point when management is trying to ask you, why are you not repairing it? Why are you not maintaining it? Why can't you just keep, fixing things? Use FCI to have that discussion. Okay. So the example given was about 21 million over 180 million, and it turned out to be 0.11 or 11.6%. Where would this fall in? This will fall into poor, isn't it? 11.6 means this asset is poor. But of course, it's poor, but you can still spend the money. It's reasonable to proceed. If that money was higher than that, up to 40% or 50%, it's been a case of critical and you shouldn't spend that money. So your deferred maintenance log will give you your FCI, because that's where all the repairs that you need to do, you've cataloged very neatly. Okay, it will also help you to prioritize your investments in your facilities maintenance, especially on budgeting. How do you budget for next year and next 2 years? You can't do it on guesswork. You have the details of everything that needs to be fixed, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term. Let's look at the principle of proactivity. It's called the 70-30 principle. If you pick up things before they fail, you will spend less. And that's why this becomes a financial principle to study. If you allow things to break before you fix them, you will spend more. What the 70-30 principle simply says is that you should be able to pick things and repair and prevent failures, at least representing 70% of all you do. So the implication of this is that everything you do on a day-to-day basis, don't have less than 70% that your attention was drawn to. Let it be that you, based on your preventive maintenance plan, are busy doing proactive, preventive work with your time, at least up to 70% of your time. Up to 70% of your resources and your investments should be on preventive, proactive work. Now, the expectation is that if you are doing more preventive, proactive work, your reactive work will be dropping, will be dwindling, because things will break down less. Customer complaints will come less. You're actually meeting them before they know they have a problem. It's a financial principle, but it is one principle that makes the difference between a good FM and a bad FM, in addition to the first point I raised about the deferred maintenance log. If you are not keeping that log right now, then you already put yourself in the category of that bad FM. Let's look at budgets. A budget is often seen as how much we will spend. That's the worst thing that happened to FM. When you say go and bring a budget, you make a list of costs. That is not a budget. A budget is a formal numerical expression of how an organization expects to operate for a defined period of time. What this means is that your budget is actually your operating plan. So how is it your operating plan? Your budget itemizes what objectives you want to achieve. What are the goals for your facility management, for your facilities? You list them out. From there, you ask yourself, what activities will I perform to arrive at these goals, to achieve these results? You list them out under each goal. Then, when will each of these activities be performed? You put the time, the month, the week, the period under each activity. You see how your plan has been created. Before you now ask, how much am I going to spend on each of these activities? Because I know the time that the activity will be performed, my cash flow pattern is automated from my budget. I know that my borehole servicing activity is in April. My generator overhauling is in September. I know I've created the activity under the various goals or objectives, and then I'm putting the schedule, and then I'm putting costs. The schedule automatically gives me my cash flow, telling me the total amount I need in January, February, March, April, from month to month, because I have created a plan. It is that flow that we call a budget. So a budget is really not a list of costs. Instead, a budget is your plan to execute an operation, to execute an outcome. Okay, so that's the first thing you have to understand. it forces communication and coordination. It's not something you just write down and say, this is my budget. No, there must be involvement from those who are going to do the work and those who are going to release the money. Because a budget also have the other component of how much are we going to get from what sources and for what period. I'm working for a hotel. I know the seasons when the hotel makes money. So my budget should also align with when that money is going to come. Not that the hotel should go and borrow money and bring to me when the holiday season that is going to bring money is not here. Or a school that collects school fees once a year or 3 times a year or twice a year, right? Should my budget not also align? Yes, I must have that income projection to meet my budget requirements. So that's why it makes us plan, it makes us coordinate, it makes us to align to strategic objectives. You know, I told you, you must have your goals, and then your goals to generate the activities, and the activities will come up with the schedule and the cost, right? That's how your budget is built up. Each of those goals or objectives that you start with must be carefully aligned to strategic objective of the organization. So you don't end up trying to spend money on the wrong things that will not add value to the organization. It helps you to show that you are supporting the organization's core business, that you're also controlling costs because you are applying the principle of best value. And then it helps you to know how to do your due diligence on how costs are going to be going up or coming down. Every time you also have some capital investments that have been approved, how will it affect your OPEX, your operations, your budgets? How do you buy oil and diesel for an old gen last year? And then you know that a brand new gen was brought in January this year. Your budget for oil and diesel is still the same for this year. It cannot be now. An old gen of 8 years cannot be consuming oil and diesel the same rate as a brand new gen. So whenever there's a capital investment, there's an impact on your OPEX. So when you're even asking management for investment in some capital expenditure, you are also modeling how that is going to reduce your operations cost. So you can use that as justification to sell that capital investment you are trying to get justification for. Every time you have items in your budget, there are certain assumptions that help you decide how much it will be, what time of the year is going to happen, and all of the things that go with it. Those assumptions must be written down. Many say, oh, we were invited for budget defense, so we had to go for budget defense. What do you do in a budget defense session? You are basically walking the people who are grilling you through the assumptions that you have written down or that you are aware of. If you ask me, instead of waiting for the budget defense session to write down your assumptions, let the assumptions be carried inside your budget. Why is your manpower cost this amount? Put there. Labor cost is going up because we're increasing with 2 people by 2 people, and also minimum wage has gone from 18,000 to 30,000, or VAT has gone from 5% to 7.5%, you know, and so on and so forth. Whatever the assumptions are, write them there. There's a new law that has outlawed Okada across the city. So we no longer have staff movements using 100 Naira Okada. We now have to use Uber to move from place to place. Put the assumptions there so that before you even come to face a panel to review and do your defense of your budget, your thinking that led to the various calculations and estimations are there. You see all those times people take a pen and say, bring this budget, cut this down, bring red barrel and mark here, circle here, remove this, remove that. If your assumptions are well thought through and carefully narrated, the cutting down will be reduced. Because it is in those assumptions, you would explain all the things that shows how your budget adds value to the organization, and then there will be not much to hammer off. Okay, so cutting costs is not something you do after the budget. Your cutting cost happens inside the budgeting cycle. So when you come up at the end of the year and say, oh, I have saved our organization 5 million because I was cutting costs, that is a criminal activity if you don't know. That 5 million should have been saved while you were budgeting. You would have done careful analysis and shown that you have saved 5 million in the budget that you have created. Because that 5 million is necessary to go to another use for the organization instead of being tied into your budget that it will not be needed for. And that's why overspending your budget or underspending your budget are two spectrums of the same offense. So don't beat your chest and come out proudly to say, I saved 20% of my budget. You can't save your budget. You save before your budget. You do due diligence, you do proper assumptions, market research, so that you save in advance of implementing your budget, not as at the time you are implementing your budget. Okay? Your budget budgeting has three approaches: the authoritative, the participative, and the combined. The authoritative budget is a budget that senior management sets everything. They set the strategic goals and they put the various activities that need to be performed. Your job is to write how you will fulfill those goals. In a participative budgeting approach, managers at all levels, from the bottom, create their goals that aligns, create the activities that will be performed, and the cost of everything. When they send it up, management will still approve or not approve, but the process of generating the budget comes from under. That's why it's called bottom-up or self-imposed budget. Then you have the combined budget. It combines the features of both the authoritative and the participative. It's also called the iterative budget. How does this work? Management can say, we have this amount, we can't spend more than this amount. And then we want to achieve so and so goals or strategies. You go and create tactical plans on how you are going to implement these strategies without spending above this amount. That is the combined approach. When you come up with your budget, management will check whether your activities are actually going to provide those results and see whether the amount they have overall globally can be captured, can be used to achieve their goals. If it's not, they will give you more work to go and do review. They will correct, they will check, they will break some things, they will move some things away and say, go and redo your budget until you come up with something from under that they can accept. Your budget will not be completed. Your budgeting will not be completed. That's called the combined approach. It's two ways communication. Now, beyond budget approaches, you also have what we call the budget methods. Budget methods can be incremental, zero-based, or activity-based. Starting with the incremental. Incremental budgets are budgets that depend on past or historical budgets or data, in the sense that you have last year's budgets that has line items and costs. In the incremental approach, all the line items are left there, but then you take the cost item and say, this is drinking water cost. How much drinking water should we need this year? Last year, there were 500 people in this building. This year, there are 200. So drinking water cost should drop. Let's put that there. How should we, this is the cost for visitors gear or visitors handling passes. How much was it last year? It was 400,000. But we have seen a steady increment in the number of visitors that come to this building now because some new tenants are having a lot of visitors compared to the old tenants that were in certain floors, right? So this particular item needs to go up. I'm using line items that existed. I'm only tweaking the amount up or down. That's incremental budgeting. Now, what is zero-based budgeting? Zero-based budgeting means that I will need to consider each line item one by one and justify why this line item should still be on the budget. In incremental one, I use all the line items and I only justify the costs or cost elements for each line items. In the zero base, I will need to delete all line items that are not adding value, so achieving my goals. And I need to add new line items that helps me achieve my goals. So any line item that does not speak to a strategic objective, there's no real reason why we are doing it, I can remove it. If I cannot link Christmas decoration of 40 million to any value to the organization, I'll remove Christmas decoration of 40 million from my budget. Because that's what zero-based budgeting does. That money can be available for something else. There's no need to cut it down to 20 million or 10 million as in case of incremental, because I've just told myself that Christmas decoration of 40 million is not adding any value. As a business, it's not important to us because, for example, a business that is shut down throughout December as holiday, all staff are on leave. What are you decorating the office for 40 million for example? Yep, take it off. That's zero-based budgeting. Activity-based budgets is practically starting from scratch. There are no line items, there are no historical costs. It's a plain sheet that you are working from. It's a typical way to start budgeting when it's your first time doing that budgeting, where you ask yourself, what are we going to achieve? What activities are we going to perform? How are they going to add value? How much are they going to cost? When? So that basic definition of budget that I gave you at the beginning is activity-based budget. I'm starting from strategy to tactics to operational activities and costing them and scheduling them before putting prices on them. And then I'm using that as my budget. So every time I look at an activity-based budget, there's no non-value adding item in it. And if I run activity budgeting as my method of budgeting from year to year, it means that once I'm approaching the next year, I will forget that I had a budget. I will start with a plain sheet again and start asking myself, what will my organization achieve next year? What strategies, what goals and objectives are we going to achieve? What activities are we going to deploy? And what schedule and time? We'll start as if we have amnesia. We've forgotten all about the past. And every time we bring up an item or an activity, we'll ask ourselves, what value is it going to bring? That's what activity-based budgeting is. Okay, and so the other item to talk about in budgeting is the types of budgets. We have the operational. Operating budget is 1 year. It carries all your routine activities. And then even though it's a 1 year budget, you still have to have authorization metrics where certain amounts can be approved at certain levels. So if I'm going to do an item in the budget that is worth 500,000 or more, I cannot just on my own award it. Even though it's been budgeted and approved, I need to get maybe my boss or a committee to look at the bids for it and then award it and so on and so forth. And then you have the capital budget. The capital budget is the one that deals with capital expenses. This is the one that you draw mostly from high-level strategic objectives, new upgrades, new buildings, moves, new equipment that goes into the capital budget, assets that need to be replaced. So your strategic facility plan and your master plan is what the capital renewal budget typically draws from. High-level strategies, the master plan that has been carefully thought through of how the site is going to be managed over the next 20 years. And then every year, you know all of the assets that are listed in your asset register. You know the ones that are reaching their useful life, all in a chart from year to year. My roof is 25 years. It was built in 1990. That means in 2025, my roof is due. I put roof in 2025. My generator is 5 years. We bought it in 2015. In 2020, my gen should be different. I put gen in 2020. So all the assets I have in my facility, I must have their useful life indicated, and then I must have the year of their potential replacement. It doesn't necessarily mean that once it gets to that year, I must replace them, but that is what I must use as my planning tool. So they must go into my budget. If I now realize that for that year, the gen is still, okay, because there's been good public supply, I've used it less, it didn't hit the 15,000 hours I thought it would hit before I do the replacement, I can defer that and move it again into next year's subsequent year's plan and not have to implement that replacement at that time. But basically, my capital budget and my operations budget should never be mixed. Don't do them on the same document. Because what happens in some facilities organization today is that clients are asking, why is the budget 10 million last year? And now you're telling me it's 26 million. And you're trying to tell them it's because the facilities are getting older. No, your operation budget should be steady. The capital budget is the one that is for long-term replacement, right? That's the one that can fluctuate, because last year I probably just replaced tiles from the floor or replaced windows. But this year I'm replacing the whole roof. So my capital budget will have to be item or subject specific. Whereas my operations budget should, be around a mean and sometimes go down, because that's what customers want. As you become better and better at providing best value, your operations cost should keep going down. So I want to show that I'm bringing value to the table. But the moment I mix capital and OPEX together, there's no way I can show that value, because my cost will be going topsy-turvy every year, and I will look as if I'm not competent. Time for questions. There's an assessment with this one. Please do it. I believe your assessment link should be up now, so you can submit through it. If you try to submit it in the link that is max-migold.com and it doesn't work, try max-migold.net. I'll put that in the group as well after talking with the IT team this evening to find out if the max-migold.net domain is the one that now has the link. So max-migold.net/ whatever it was that completed your survey submission link, you can use that to submit your assessments. All right, so I'm going to give a few minutes break while you go through your notes and pop up your hand for possible questions you will have, and then I'll take it there. Thank you. Let's see whose hand is up. Okay, I have one. Olayemi, go ahead.
Thank you for a very elaborate class today. It was very revealing. I have 3 questions here.
Sorry,
the first one
I
actually
wasn't putting on my headset. Let's hear you again.
Okay. I was appreciating the class. The wealth of knowledge you have gained into this class. That's the first thing I was trying to say. I said also that I had 3 questions here I want to ask. The first one actually is I'm trying to get a clarification. You mentioned something when you were showing the iceberg the other time. The total cost of maintaining the building. I didn't get that figure very well. You were saying that is it the total cost or the cost of let me say the maintenance for
maintenance cost
a building? Yes, the maintenance cost. Is it like? Did you mention 3%?
3.5% as benchmark of its value of the value
of the value.
Yes. So if you do a valuation on a property and you value it at 1 billion, for example, right? That's the valuation of that property. 3.5% is benchmark cost for operations and maintenance.
For that particular year?
Yes, for 1 year.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Second question. So I was trying to ask, I want to know if you have critical asset, like for example, I think you mentioned some like generators, for example, the central AC and all those critical assets that you have been operating, and then you are looking at when this you have actually carried out the cost analysis for the life cycle. The life cycle cost of each equipment.
Yes.
Okay, that this equipment, maybe from the information we get from the OEM or from other users that have been using it, that maybe this equipment will eventually we need to be replaced maybe in the next 7 years.
Yes.
For example.
Yeah.
How do we begin to get prepared to convince the management that, okay, with this thing, for example, let me give you a typical example I'm having. I have a 650 kV generator, and this gives one of them have already reached 15,000 run out. And then we are having, the cost of maintenance from what I've done, the analysis I've done is getting higher. From that CFI, you mentioned,
FCI, yes.
CI, sorry.
Yeah.
Has gotten beyond that 30%.
Okay.
So definitely, I've actually made a condition for replacement based on that. So now the problem is there is no pre-plan on ground or a money set aside for such a replacement. Now, how do we convince the company that, okay, so I've been telling them all this while that I have a sinking fund.
Yes.
You can have a particular percentage of the total budget for a year. Maybe if you're having like, let me say 1 million naira for a year, save like say 50,000 naira, put it in that sinking fund. So that at the end of the year,
there is something always building up there. Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know, maybe that is the right thing to do, or maybe there is a superior.
So that is the practical way to go. Management should not chop all the rent and not, make provisions for asset replacement. If I'm your tenant, right, you cannot charge me for asset replacement because I'm paying rent on the assets. when I came to rent your facility, the roof is part of the facility. The walls, the floors, the roadways, the drainages, the plumbing system is part of your equipment, your asset, isn't it? I'm paying rent to you. Okay? Now, if you collect the rent, you are supposed to put a percentage of all rent collected into an asset replacement account. Because I want to keep collecting the rent continuously, I must make sure these assets remain in a good condition so I can keep collecting premium rent forever, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So I cannot milk the assets to death at the same time keep collecting premium rent. If the roof starts leaking, if anybody agrees to stay, they will pay half price, isn't it? If the toilet stops working, they will pay 1/4 of the price. So your rent is going down, your facility is becoming notoriously evil and terrible, isn't it? So for you to maintain that value is a landlord's responsibility. That's why in some estates that I'm involved in, I tell, okay, so the landlords are the ones that will pay capital replacement fund, not tenants. It's not the tenant's business. It's from, it's from the rent landlord collects. He will pay that capital replacement fund, right? Now, because if you tell a tenant that, let me take some of your service charge to put for asset replacement, he will tell you, how long do you know I want to stay here? So you'll be taking my 50,000 now to replace assets of another person that he will give me quick notice tomorrow and I'll be out of here. Why would you? I won't pay that money. No tenant should hear that. That's where we often get it wrong. We try to get tenants to contribute a part of their service charge for asset replacement. It's not their responsibility, so they will not pay. And that's why sometimes when the asset breaks down, and you now say, oh, all of you who live here, let's come and raise money for the replacement. Somebody will now start asking you, if I'm leaving next week, can I remove the battery and take along?
Out of my share.
I'm a co-owner of the asset. Don't make tenants co-owners of the assets. They are just there and they've paid their rent that represent the day and time they are using the asset. So that's the first thing, all right? Now, you might get to a point where that problem now becomes really big. The person who's been collecting rent had not kept some money aside to replace the generator like you're experiencing right now. This is actually a prompt for you to explore other alternatives like IPPs and lease generators that will go into operations. All right, so you could actually get another company, bring their own 650 kVA generator, do the maintenance, and just sell power to you as the only thing you get. They deal with the business. This time, you would have subtly changed the agreement between the tenant and the property owner by making the tenant pay a higher cost per kilowatt hour, because part of that money will account for the asset costs that the contractor who is bringing his energy or power is going to use to install that equipment. Are you getting what I'm saying? You would have, in a very subtle way, transferred the fixed asset cost to tenants by buying power direct, because the power direct purchase agreement includes an amount for that man's equipment that he's going to use to power you. That is the only practical way you can get around tenants, landlords issues around asset replacement. One, it's landlord's responsibility, and if landlord will not do it, the property will fall apart. But if tenants are willing to pick it up, the only way you can make them pick it up is by going to the lease or the power purchase agreement approach, where you no longer have a generator to call your own. So when they are paying, maybe they are paying 60 naira per kilowatt now, and then they have to pay 100 naira per kilowatt to the power provider. You understand? That extra 40 naira is actually contribution to generator costs, which is now hidden into the cost you are charging them. And many of them, I say, okay, you know what? It's even good, Seth. I hate this whole diesel calculation every month and reconciliation of this every month. Let's just know that you are metering us and we are paying you this 90 naira or 100 naira. And, you know, they just see it as a way of reducing their stress. They'll pay it, but you have achieved two things. It's not only the stress you reduced, you passed a bill of the landlord to them without them even
knowing that they are picking it up.
Yes.
So I also want to ask, sorry to take your time.
No,
cost like, let me say, painting of the building.
Yes.
Of the building, the common area, apart from the
internal of your spaces, yeah.
Yes. Who is supposed to pick it up? The
landlord's responsibility. Roof, aesthetics, sites, improvements and upgrades are all our responsibility. But the routine cutting of grass and watering of flowers, fumigation, and pest control, those ones are all tenants' responsibilities, right? Those are, but if you have to now invest in new curbs, for example, or you want to cast a new driveway, they are all landlord's responsibility. Or you want to paint the building or replace all the windows, they are landlord's responsibilities.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. And last question, I want to ask, under what condition will a company be operating activity-based budgeting? Like the one you see every year now, we start all over again. Because I'm looking at, I'm just trying to get a scenario whereby we have what we prompt a company to operate in such a...
It's very rare. It's very rare. But almost all companies will not operate activity budget year to year, but your first budget has to be activity budget.
Okay.
Your subsequent budget, your subsequent budget will not be zero base or incremental.
Incremental. Okay.
Yeah. Now, so in a rare situation where there are constant changes in the economy, in the industry they're operating in, and they have to re-engineer their process frequently. Every time you are doing a business process re-engineering, you must do activity budget with it. Because you have to think everything new using current realities and where you want to go to now. Because where you were trying to get to last year may be different from where you want to go to this year. You understand? So there's no need adjusting last year's previous budget. You start with activity based. That way, you are focused on only the things you want to do. And then from organizations that adopt sustainability and want to do value stream mapping to remove waste from their system, right? They may end up using activity-based budget again, where they go to the bare bone and just say, what is the basic thing that we can use to produce the minimum viable product? You understand? For our client to be satisfied with, right? What's the minimum? They'll just piece them together. Some companies have set up now and they're not planning to have an office. They have grown to 500, 800 staff and they don't have one office. They just told themselves that there is no need for an office because all that we want to do, we can do it without coming to an office. I have a client that I've been trying to mobilize to their site now. Before COVID, as soon as they heard of COVID, they said, no, the site is now mothballed. So they shut down the site. COVID finished, move back to the office now. They don't want to go back to the office. So my contract is at stake.
We are having the same thing here.
Exactly, because they have found a way to do their work without the office. You understand? So such a change can necessitate activity-based budget. You know, ask yourself again, really. You know, somebody say office, they say, no, leave office. We're out of office. We're not using office at all. So yes, when things are changing frequently and you need to do re-engineering, value stream mapping, you might need to revisit everything from scratch regularly. So in the frequent change environment, activity-based budgets can be applied.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
All right, thank you. Ibukun, go ahead.
All right, sir. Thank you for the class. It was really revealing. The first one is more like a clarification. You talked about using Excel. Then you talked about the templates. Then you mentioned something about the amortization. Something I didn't get that clearly.
They didn't go together in this. They didn't go together in the same range of discussion. You have to help me here, because what you are discussing are two ends of the class. When I talked about amortization was one end, and when I talked about templates and Excel, I was talking about technology at the beginning of the class.
Okay. Well, no, you're talking about the templates to how do I put it now? We're talking about your cost, and then checking. I think it has to maybe checking the incremental effect.
Okay. I see what you mean. Okay, yes. Okay, I see what you mean. So if you go to Excel, there are standard templates in Excel, right? If you have Excel Online or Office 365, you get access to plenty. Like you want to do a loan repayment plan, for example, or a savings plan for something, or you want to do an amortization or a depreciation of a certain amount over a certain period, you get templates for doing those in Excel.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about there.
Okay, so we can Google that up also, right?
They're in your Excel app. They're in your Excel app.
They're in the Excel app.
You see open, new, and when you get to new, you see options.
Yes, the templates, yes, I can see them, but I didn't just see the amortization. I saw the financial management, I saw budget, and
those are all subject areas. If you click on any one, you see all the templates inside that area.
Templates, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, sir. Secondly, you talked about underspending, overspending is an offense.
Equal offense.
Is that correct?
Yes, equal.
But
in gravity.
Okay, but in every budget, there will always be a deficit or surplus at the end of the day.
Now I understand. That is variation. Yeah. The amount of variation is what you want to control.
Okay.
Yeah. If the variation is small, it means you've done your due diligence well. You've implemented well. That variation is small. So small to zero variation, pass mark. Wide variation, up or down, equal problem.
Is there a figure to define the small?
Small is usually plus or minus 5%.
Okay. All right.
Small to zero is plus or minus 5%. Some organizations don't have tolerance for 5%. Some organizations' tolerance is 2.5%. I have been in an organization where it was 3%. More than 3%, you go for probe. Both ways.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, fantastic. All right, Daniel, you wanted to say something before. Have you gotten your answer now? Okay. All right, thank you guys. Please work on your assessment now and have it ready. Yes.
Hello.
Okay, Daniel, you want to speak? Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to ask a question, but it was partly answered.
Okay.
In the before.
That is
Mr. Ibukun.
Okay. Fantastic.
That is how to do with the infrastructure discharge, right? Let me use that word. That is the
that's what you call it.
The asset replacement.
Yes, that's fine.
Can you hear me? I don't know.
Yes, I hear you fine.
Okay.
Yes. So I think I answered the question when I told you that is the landlords or owners that contribute to that fund.
I'm very much aware for the past 6 years that is the owner's obligation. I had an interaction with an owner, and he raised his concern over that collection, that infrastructure discharge. And I also tried to reason with the point he raised there. You know, especially where a tenant, the owner is not active resident, meaning that he's not staying in the property.
Yeah.
You know, then you have to send invoice to this owner every year and all that. And the owner might be sitting back in US and all that. Say, well, I don't care because my tenant is paying me. And this tenant in question is living up to, to our obligation, meaning that the service charge that is due to this tenant,
it's paying it up. Yeah.
Paying it.
Yes.
Yes, as at when due.
Sure.
with it. You can't disconnect the tenant on the basis of capital charge. Because this tenant is paying service charge, which is I usually call it consumable. Consumable service that you also give to this tenant. The tenant is paying it as at when due. So then you keep piling up. And eventually, when time comes for you to replace these assets, getting these tenants, various owners that are scattered all over the country or overseas. That's okay. Well, then decide they are messy. You know, I know this ought to have been enforced at the beginning, early and of being nipped at the bud. But I feel that the game has to change. That is what I feel. It's something I've been brainstorming, you know, within myself, also discussing, engaging other stakeholders to see the best way this bill, this money can be collected, it be paid timely, and then without having issues because somebody now has that telling you what the money that we have been paying, what did you use it for, and also, you know. So I have not arrived on a conclusion yet. I'm just okay. Why don't this bill be factored into the facility bill?
Okay, so it's actually
service
immoral.
Charge. You know. Let me
You know, factoring it into the service charge is actually unethical. That's the basic answer. Because
you said earlier.
Yeah, the person who is paying the rent is paying the rent based on the infrastructure that has been promised. I'm paying 2 million for a flat instead of paying 1 million for another estate. Because my kids can drive their cycle on the streets of this estate that is all paved, I can run with my wife to jog in the evening because it is lighted, right? That's why I pay 2 million here instead of 1 million in the other one, right? So whoever is collecting my 2 million is the one providing me those streets and providing me the water resource, the water that is clean, is not red or brown, is the one providing me everything. Because as I come in there, apart from consumable items that I pay for based on how much I use, the entire infrastructure is being provided to me by whoever I'm paying rent to. So it's that person that contributes to ensure that that infrastructure is in place. Now, how do you work around this? If a landlord is bringing a tenant in, you make sure that all infrastructure lease charge of subsequent previous tenants are cleared before another tenant can come in.
Definitely.
So that is one point where you get all the money back. Another point where you get the money back is an arrangement with the landlords to say, allow the tenants to deduct the infrastructure lease charge when they are paying the rent so that they can pay this one directly to us. It will be a win-win arrangement for everybody, because what that simply means is that the tenant sees it as a reduction in his rent and he sees himself as the one spending that money to you, right? Which is not a bad idea. That can also be an arrangement that will make everybody get their money on time. But the bottom line is that if you try to fix it into the routine service charge, one customer, one client, one occupant will come in and create a mess for the whole estate. So whatever challenge you think you're having right now, that the landlords are not paying until somebody is changing apartments or whatever arrangement you can work out with these landlords, it's a lesser problem to deal with than having tenants paid, because I've seen estates completely unravel because of conflicts that goes to courts, and the courts have judged again and again against estates who are trying to collect this money from the tenants. So in essence, it's a no-go area. Okay.
It's going to be hidden. Let me put it this way. It's not like this cost will be hidden. Mean that you factor, okay, when you are coming to rent my property, I can put it this way. My service charge is this.
Okay, I see what you mean.
The capital charge to this is this, but it's chunky, meaning that it's inseparable. You cannot pay separately. That is one of the strategy like I want to like use
deploy.
Now. Okay. These services are two different. These facility bills have two different facility bills.
Yes.
Service charge, infrastructure discharge, but this money I cannot take it in parts, in piecemeal as a tenant. That for you, for us, for me to collect this, we have to ensure that this money collected together. Comes together, yes. Now, one of the, before you react to that, the argument with what one of the person that I engaged is the owner. I was saying that, look, this replacement or reserve fund you are trying to save for depreciation of asset over a period.
Yeah.
Early is the tenant or whoever at the point in time actually use this facility. This wear and tear setting because somebody use it. Somebody somebody consumed this product.
But that's what the person paid his rent for. The person paid his rent to use it. The person paid his rent to use it. That's where the wear and tear for the rent comes in. So if you decide to cancel that charge, because some FM companies have actually done that, they kill it off, they raise their rates for service charge, and out of their service charge, on their own, they save an amount. So the landlords are absorbed.
Thank you. That is what another.
Yes. So the landlords are absorbed of the responsibility, and the FM companies now start taking it. What it means is that if your service charge was 200,000, we say service charge has gone up to 300,000, right? And everybody will banter back and forth, but eventually start paying maybe 250K. At that 250K, I know I can still manage the service at 200K. So I now start putting 50K as infrastructure investment. That will be because I am FM company and I want to start saving that money from my money because I have right to raise my service charge anyway. Are you get what I'm saying? So bottom line is you need to just understand how we are getting to that point where you can hide it. You really can't hide it and talk about it. You are hiding it to absorb it and saying, my service charge is big enough for me to chest this kind of expenses in the future. And I must be disciplined to be saving that money away. Then that's fine.
Okay. That is one of the strategy I was also trying out. Looking at still brainstorming because I said, why don't I raise this service charge? And like what just said now. Every collection per house, I take a percentage. This for a reserve fund or for asset replacement or as the case may be. As we're saying that if you are because trying to put a burden, transfer owner's burden to
tenants.
Tenant is like a time bomb.
Yes.
A day will come that somebody going to raise the issue and you have to I've stayed this, you have to, So and thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, let me hear from Kingsley. Kingsley, go ahead, please.
The last, okay.
Okay, Dana, you have another question. Go ahead.
Yes, you made mention on the deferred maintenance budget, right?
Yes.
Is it deferred
maintenance?
Okay.
Yes.
Deferred maintenance budget. You listed the. I was actually driving, so I didn't take the note down. But let me just recap if I'm wrong, guys. I just have this in my head. Talk about the item name, which is we can call it the asset name.
Yes.
The defect. The deferred asset.
Yes.
And then the description, right?
Description of the defect, yes.
And then the cost. And then
no, the description of the defects The scope, then the next item is the scope of the repair of that defect. You know, when you describe the defect, you now also need to scope the repair required. Is it a replacement? Is it a change of parts? Is it a repair? You understand? You must scope the repair work that you must do to fix that defect.
You got this.
Okay, you didn't hear me well there.
Yes. Okay. Can you just maybe recap all that?
Okay, let me recap. Okay, so you have first the asset like you listed, the defect itself, the scope of work, or the description of the defect, how bad things are with that defect, or whatever the scope of work of that defect is. The scope of work to fix the defect. There's a scope of defect and there's a scope of work to fix defects. Okay, the costs of fixing that defect. The reason why that defect has been left unfixed. The prioritization or criticality of that defect. So that helps you to prioritize whether it should be done immediately, urgently, mid-term or long-term, right? I've talked about the cost. Then you now have to add, what else? So you can add things like when they were done, when the work was done, you know, how much was spent, you know, other things can be added to it at that point. Yes, go on, Daniel.
Said item, the asset name.
Yes.
The scope of work to be carried on the defect.
Yes.
Cost of fixing.
Yes.
And then the reason of deferring that,
yes.
That work.
Yes.
And then the priority or the criticality of the
of that work, or yes, of that requirement. Yes. Yeah, I think you pretty much got the list. Let me take Kingsley. Kingsley, can you go on with your question? That will be the last. We already crossed 7 o'clock.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sorry, I logged in late. I've been a bit indisposed.
Oh, okay. Sorry about
that. I actually returned back to work yesterday, and I was asked to give to do like a budget, like you said. And the budget comes in. I was asked to give a budget for diesel, NEPA, power, you know, which contains diesel and of course NEPA light. The subscriptions, that is DSTV, and then internet, and of course electrical repairs. So what I did was I now responded to them. Okay, fine. That for me to do this, should I do like a quarter budget or a yearly budget? Looking at the financial strength of the company, I don't think we would do budget. The money might not. That would, if I should do it for a year, I don't think that would be possible. So I now decided to do it quarterly. And then what I did was, after I did it, I now sat down and said, okay, fine. If I should assume, like you said in that we should just do an assumption list and say, okay, fine, for diesel, following the theoretical list that I've seen, okay, fine. The maximum they do for diesel is monthly is about 1 million naira. Then I decided for NEPA is about 250,000. That comes up to 1.2 million, 0.250 million. Then I decided to do it for, okay, fine, let's do 1.5. It could be less than that at the end of the month, because I have look at it. What happens in the month that we don't have, that maybe the power issue with NEPA, and we have to run diesel all through. that means our diesel cost for that month is going to rise. And looking at diesel cost, it will not, if I say, okay, let me match up with the NEPA, there's no way it will come up to it, it will be able to accumulate it. So that means we're going to spend more. So I just come up and say, okay, let me do 1.4 million naira. And then I've been asked that why doing 1.4 million naira on this? We'll be doing 1.2, this is what? And then these are my reasons that, okay, fine. I came up with this. Of course, we have a log, we have a database where I keep all expense. We do reconciliations with the accountants, with the management every Monday's meeting. To tell them, okay, fine, the certain amount was disbursed for certain project. This is how we spent it. This is the balance. Else are you there?
I'm with you, yes.
Okay, so now my question is, am I on the right track, or is there something I ought to have done or I need to do?
You are a bit off track. First, a budget is annual, always annual. Okay, that's the first thing.
Sorry, sir. I understand that, but looking at it, I was going through report from the the business executive that was before I took over. I noticed that their budget usually, sometimes they do 2 month budget, 3 months budget, 6 months. I've not seen a year budget.
I understand. See, try to understand something.
Okay, sir.
It's a practice that has been there. Some people do monthly budgets, quarterly budgets, 6 months, right? The whole idea of a budget is not that once I do a budget, you release the money to me. No. My budget is for planning. So that in the budget, it will now show the amount I need either weekly or monthly or quarterly. So depending on how the management likes to disburse, my budget can be broken down into disbursement cycles. Okay, so I do a 1-year budget, and then I begin to get. Yeah, exactly. I will now, if they want 1 month, I take 1 month out, because every month will not be the same. You understand?
Yeah.
So that's why you need to do a 1-year budget. So you have a full cycle, and then you can take a quarter and the next quarter. So why you need to do that is you don't need to be bringing something people have not seen every quarter. It's important for people to see what the next quarter and the next 2 quarters will look like, even though they are not dealing with it now. Okay, that's the first point. Now, the second point is, if you are trying to write down your assumption, right? Let your assumptions or your due diligence that you have done be based on facts. Okay, I cannot base assumptions on fears. For example, diesel has been 1.2, 1.2, right? I want to make it 1.4 in my budget. I must show a trend that 1.2 was formerly 1 million, was formerly 800,000. That's why I am trending it to 1.4. Or as at the time it's 1.2, it was 220 per liter, because the liters we are using are expected to be the same. Now it is 250 per liter. That's why it's going to 1.4. Or I have noticed that our power availability from the grid has been dropping. As at 1.2, we're getting 50% generator versus grid. But it is going to the point where we are now beginning to do 60% generator and 40% from the grid. There must be facts, there must be numbers to justify that thing I put there. I must create a chart to show how I got that my 1.4. And I won't put a 1.4. I will plot that chart to show exactly what the chart is showing. Maybe 1.29, 1.345, 1.41, something that shows that I actually use a scientific means, not guesswork. Assumptions in professional circles does not mean rule of thumb, does not mean arbitrary assumptions. Assumptions are always fact-based, number-based, charts and trends-based, provable. Okay.
Right, so then secondly is on the there's a property we that happens to be the FM. Recently, they just brought we've actually requested for prepaid meter for all tenants, about 6 tenants. They brought one, said it will take another 1 or 2 months for them to bring that. They can't bring everything at once. And then the owner of the property said that I should go ahead and install the first one I was given. It was installed last week and then commissioned. Now the challenge is, because not all flats use the same appliances. What is going to be the sharing ratio?
I don't understand. Are the meters not supposed to be installed one by one for each flat?
That's what we actually, we apply for 6, but one has been supplied, installed, and commissioned
on one person's apartment.
On one, no, putting up tenants, all the 6 flats on 1 meter.
I don't understand. Why are you doing that?
That is what the owner of the property said he wants.
But I don't understand. So you order 6 meters for each tenant separately, isn't it?
Yes, please.
So this is just a temporary means of not overpaying.
Exactly.
Yes, not overpaying
until
other meters come. Then you cannot remove it and assign it to one. Is it a prepaid meter or a postpaid meter?
The prepaid meter.
Prepaid meter. So there's contribution to buy the light bill and
the token, yeah.
And then you don't have, there's no other means of metering people except you can actually meter them. You cannot share light bill without metering. I'm sorry, fortunately. So if there's a temporary arrangement right now, let that temporary arrangement make it equal. 3-bedroom flats, everybody pay the same rate. We'll share it at the same amount, and then we'll suffer it until we can meter properly, right? Because you really can't use any other yardstick or means to share light bill equitably. If you come and count the assets in my house, and based on that, you give me more bill. If those assets are mostly switched off because I'm not at home, the next person that has only one item that is on 24 hours may be consuming more than me, and they'll be paying so little. So you can't, there's no other basis. Until you have metering for all the tenants, everybody will pay equally.
All right, sir.
But the implication of that is that people will be more reckless because human beings are naturally selfish. They will see it as an opportunity to become reckless, to drain their neighbors' funds because they are all paying equally, but you can't help it for now. Equal distribution of that funds for now until the bills come, okay?
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you guys. Have a nice evening. See you on Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.
All right, bye, sir.
Excellent.
Nice, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, class.
Sir.
Good night, sir.
Good night.
Yeah.
Bye.